Welcome, Akiko Meyers, to Music So Sweet, Personal Reflections. Well, first of all, I just want to ask you, how are you doing these days, and how are you keeping yourself occupied? I know you're about one of the busiest people I know on the planet, always doing a concert or recording or masterclass. So, what are you doing to stay sane? Are you?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me to be on your podcast. And, this is a really interesting time in history. I don't think we've ever experienced anything quite like it. And with that, lots of things are new and frustrating. And, there's definitely a learning curve involved of trying to get my girls online with Zoom for school and keeping a daily kind of routine, a healthy routine to remind ourselves that life will return in some way, not the way we knew it, but it will return, and there will be lots of things that we will have learned by then.
Are you using some of this time to get to practice new pieces and things like that?
Yes, I actually am releasing a new piece by Arvo Pärt.
Oh, I saw
Uh,
that. Yeah, for Mother's Day.
yes, it's called the Estonian Lullaby. And in time for Christmas last year, he sent me a handwritten manuscript of this beautiful lullaby.
Wow.
And I was just in shock. I didn't expect it. And I couldn't talk for 15 minutes when I saw this letter that came all the way from Estonia. I was able to record it with Reiko Chida in New York City before the lockdown in January.
Wow.
And so it's being released in time for Mother's Day this year. I'm also working on two new concertos, one that I'm scheduled to premiere at the Hollywood Bowl this summer by a Mexican composer named Arturo Marquez. And I really literally begged him to write this concerto. And so he sent the first movement to me, and it's really kept me quite busy.
Mm.
And then another concerto by Michael Dougherty that I'm set to premiere next year at the Kennedy Center. It's a concerto about the American female icon Amelia Earhart. And
Mm.
it's really just amazing music. I just am loving learning it. So that has really kept me happy in my practice room for the little time that I get there on a daily basis.
Yeah. Well, good on you for being so active and getting people to write music for you. And I think that's outstanding. That's the way to go. Uh, I remember, my teacher William Primrose was always having composers write pieces for him, and now we have such great literature for the viola.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Relationship of working together with a composer, living composer, it's just so enjoyable to me. And everybody has such a different process. And so, to be a part of that, and, I always think about that with the Samuel Barber Violin Concerto, because it is one of the most iconic and beautiful concertos. And, if I were lucky enough to commission him to write that, how would it have been different? I just always wonder, with all these composers throughout history.
And let's talk a little bit about that fabulous violin concerto. And that particular concerto kind of got off to a little bit of a rocky start anyway, didn't it?
Very much so.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really interesting how it parallels the distress that humanity is going through right now, and how that was written in 1939, really at the start of World War II. And, he was commissioned for $1,000 to write this violin concerto by a very wealthy soap magnate. And his name was also Samuel Fells. He had this kind of prodigious student named Iso Bruselli, who was a student at the Curtis Institute and in the same class as Barber, who he wanted to have this violin concerto written for. And so Barber went to Switzerland and started writing the first two movements of the concerto. And soon he had to return to the US via Paris and a boat, because that's how travel was back then. He returned to the Poconos, and at that time, I think he sent the first two movements to Briselli, and this violinist said, that's really nice and all, but make sure that you really make the third movement something just so virtuoso and high flying, and something that I can really sink my teeth into. And Barber just was kind of like, that's really nice, but I've already come up with the third movement, and this is what it's going to be. Briselli was really, really disappointed. He did not like the third movement. He felt that it was unplayable, that it totally didn't go together with the first two movements, which were so lush and romantic and so melodic. He actually asked for his money back. And Barber said, I've already spent half of it, 500 whopping dollars of it, so I can't return the rest. And so basically, the most iconic violin concerto in American history was written for $500.
Wow.
Extraordinary to think of. And Briselli just said that he just couldn't play that last movement. It was just not for him. So Barber found another violinist to actually learn it and sight read it within a couple hours in a studio at Curtis. And the violinist said, oh, it's totally playable. And then it was really premiered in 1941 by Albert Spaulding. And I think that was like Eugene Ormandy and the Philadelphia Orchestra.
Correct.
So yeah, it's a great premiere, a great story. And, I'm just so thankful to Samuel Barber for sticking to his guns and keeping that last movement the way it is, because it is so original. It is so scary as the soloist to play it.
And the orchestra too.
Oh yeah, terrifying.
It is.
It's a high wire act for 4 minutes, and there's nothing like it. But it is so thrilling. It's just like every time I play it, I'm just like, I'm praying as hard as I can that I will actually survive.
Wow.
But it's like so rhythmic, and it moves forward so quickly, and it has these amazing accents in it throughout too. Everyone's kind of like careening off a cliff to just end together.
True.
So, the audience always just goes wild too at the end. It's like, oh my God. Wow.
Well,
that was quite a ride.
When did you first learn of this piece? I mean, you must have been young because you've been playing it for so many years. And what makes this concerto stand out from other great violin concertos?
I heard of the Barber growing up when I was studying with Alice Schoenfeld in California. And she had an older student who was playing it, and I was so struck by its beauty, initially. And it always was tucked in my mind that I had to learn this concerto. When I was 18, I had the opportunity to record my first album with the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra. And, they asked me, what do you want to record? And this is back in 1988. So, the Barber Violin Concerto was really not performed much at all. But that was my first choice. And I said, Barber and Bruch. That was the first time I recorded it. And then like in 2014, I re-recorded it with Leonard Slatkin in the London Symphony Orchestra. And I have performed it, like, you really truly can call me the Barber Queen, because I have played this concerto hundreds of times.
Wow.
And every time I find something in it that just is so rewarding. I really never tire of it.
I find the same thing about it. And the thing that amazes me about Barber's music in general, it lingers with you. It languishes. It
Yes.
sticks around. It's in my head right now. While as I'm talking to you, I hear it. And this violin concerto, it grabs you from the first two bars. I mean, I don't know how it does that. It's just the melody, the lyricism. I don't know what it is. The sound that he gets, but right away, I want more of this, and that's what I
Yeah.
found about this piece. I just love it so much. And, each one of these movements has such a different emotional character to it. As a
Mm-hmm.
performer, how do you guide yourself emotionally, strength wise, or sort of just energy wise from character to character from each movement?
It's so rare that a concerto just starts from the first note with the orchestra. And that's what makes this concerto really unique.
That's true.
There's always some kind of an intro normally with the orchestra, but it just starts together. And I think it has such a vocal quality to it where you immediately are singing and you're singing a line. And I think that's what draws the listener in so much. And it draws me in too. I'm always thinking, oh, like I'm almost like an ice skater going out on this giant rink. And I'm just, gracefully doing all these mind-boggling jumps and leaps,
Wow.
but in a very vocal style, like a very fluid style. And that's what draws me to the concerto so much, and especially like the first movement is so lyrical, but the second movement, there's this line when you reach the low G string, and you're just soaring. It's just like the sea has parted and you are just walking through there, like just it's so kind of noble and majestic in a way. And that's what always really draws me in. And then before the third minute movement, you're just always like taking a major, like inhale and exhale. Like,
Big gulp.
here we go. Yeah, big gulp. It's the big
Wow.
gulp time of just hold on to your hats. You just don't know what's going to happen.
Well, I like what you say about the singing part because I've been so attracted to Barber's vocal music.
Mm-hmm.
And the first chapter of our episode on Samuel Barber, we did the Knoxville Summer of 1915.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful recording with Don Upshaw.
Yes.
And that piece just, again, it's one of those that, it seems like he's a master at creating a sound painting. That
Mm-hmm.
you actually, it's very visual music. The violin concerto is very visual to me when I listen to it.
Very much.
It's not like I'm seeing colors, but maybe I am seeing colors, but I'm also feeling something that is different.
Yeah.
And his music really grabs me that way. I fell in love with Samuel Barber's music when I was in college, and I listened to about everything I could possibly find that was recorded at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And there were some really rare pieces that hardly ever get performed, and I try to perform them whenever I can because they're so worthy of being heard.
Mm-hmm.
But the main thing that distinguishes him from all those other guys, and they're all great, Copland and Bernstein and Gershwin and all the other great American composers, is he has such depth through his music, and he creates a very personal communication
Yes.
between what he's written and what goes into your soul and your heart and your body. It's amazing how he can grip you that way.
Absolutely. Yeah, beautifully said. Absolutely.
So the performance we're going to watch today on YouTube is your old program from 2006 with the Slovenian Philharmonic. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that experience?
So I was invited by George Pellavanian, who was the music director then, to premiere the Barber there. And it's just so surprising how many times I've been invited to a city, and even just recently I performed it with the Lausanne Symphony Orchestra,
Mm,
and it was the first time they had ever performed it.
wow.
Yeah, and it's just so strange to know that also Barber wrote it in Switzerland, the first two movements, and yet
Yeah,
it's not
true.
performed in Europe much.
Mm,
And it was such an interesting experience because the performers on stage, the orchestra members, were really looking at this music for the very first time in their
wow.
lives.
Mm,
And so, it brings such a different element and a different perspective when you see it with such fresh eyes like that.
mm.
And, you know, I went back for I remember going back like for 10 stage calls or something. Like, I thought that they would never respond to this kind of music, behind like they were behind the Iron Curtain for so long,
Wow.
but they loved it. They just absolutely loved the music. So I was thrilled to be performing there, and I hope I return one day.
Yeah. So what violin were you playing at that time? Do you remember?
I was performing on a Stradivari violin. And I think it was called the Rosé Strad.
Mm,
Sounds like a nice wine, but yeah, it was a beautiful violin,
yeah,
and
beautiful violin.
yeah,
Right around that time, I think you played the Barber here in San Luis Obispo,
yeah.
and you also played the Chaconne from the Red Violin, I think.
Oh yes, I totally remember that concert. So
Yeah, me
glad that
too.
you asked me to play that. Yeah, I love that piece too.
So, Anne, before we go today, is there something that you would like our listeners to know a little bit more about the Barber Violin Concerto from your standpoint as a performer?
I am just so thrilled to see it as such a regular standard piece now in concert halls, and I really saw kind of like the birth of that concerto. I feel like, and it has grown into a beautiful, beautiful, vital human being. I think that people appreciate it so deeply, and I'm definitely one of those people who just is so thankful to Barber to have written such an amazing concerto.
I agree. Thank you very, very much.